My husband chose his family over me. So I quietly built a life they could never control again. Have you ever realized that the people asking you to keep the peace are usually asking you to carry all the pain? I learned that lesson on a rainy Sunday afternoon, standing in my mother-in-law's dining room, while everyone watched my husband wait for me to apologize for something I hadn't done. He thought I would lower my head like I always had. Instead, I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because in that exact moment, I finally understood something terrifying. If I stayed, this would be the rest of my life. My name is Claire, and I was 36 years old when I stopped trying to become acceptable to people who had already decided I never would be. I had been married to Ethan for 7 years. We had a 5-year-old daughter named Lily, who loved drawing butterflies, collecting shiny rocks, and believed every family was supposed to laugh together at dinner. I spent years protecting that innocent belief. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't protecting Lily. I was protecting everyone else from the consequences of their behavior. Ethan wasn't cruel. At least, not intentionally. He worked long hours as an architect. He remembered birthdays. He never forgot our anniversary. He adored Lily. If you met him for 10 minutes, you would probably describe him as kind. The problem wasn't the man he was when we were alone. The problem was the man he became whenever his family entered the room. Around them, he stopped thinking for himself. His mother had an opinion about everything. My career. My clothes. Our home. My cooking. Even the way I laughed. Every visit came with a criticism wrapped inside fake concern. Oh honey, are you sure that's healthy? You've gained a little weight. Lily would probably behave better if you were stricter. I only say these things because I care. The words were always polite. The damage never was. Whenever I mentioned it later, Ethan always answered with the exact same sentence. She's old-fashioned. Don't take it personally. At first, I believed him. Then months became years. Eventually, I stopped expecting anything different. Until the afternoon, everything finally broke. It was Ethan's father's retirement celebration. Almost 30 relatives crowded into his parents' house. Children ran through the hallway. Football played loudly in the living room. People laughed over conversations that sounded happy from across the room. I stood in the kitchen helping prepare food, while Lily colored quietly at the table beside me. She had spent nearly an hour drawing a birthday card for Grandpa. She was so proud of it. When my mother-in-law walked into the room, she glanced at Lily's drawing. Then she looked at me. You really should put her in more structured activities. I blinked. I'm sorry. Children her age shouldn't spend so much time drawing. Lily looked down at her picture. The excitement disappeared from her face. I knelt beside her. I think it's beautiful. She smiled again. My mother-in-law sighed dramatically. See? That's exactly what I mean. What do you mean? You encourage mediocrity. The room suddenly became very quiet. Several relatives looked over. Nobody interrupted. Nobody changed the subject. Everyone simply waited. The familiar feeling settled into my stomach. That uncomfortable pressure I had carried for years. Usually I would smile. Usually I would pretend nothing happened. Usually I would protect everyone's comfort. But that day, something inside me refused. I stood up slowly. I don't think encouraging my daughter to be creative makes me a bad mother. The words weren't loud. They weren't angry. They were simply true. My sister-in-law Melissa laughed. There she goes. There I go, what? Making everything about herself. A few people chuckled. Others looked away. Lily quietly folded her drawing in half. My heart broke. Not because of the adults. Because my daughter had just learned what humiliation looked like. I reached for her hand. Before I could speak again, Ethan walked into the kitchen. He immediately sensed the tension. What happened? Melissa answered before anyone else could. Claire's being dramatic again. Again. That word. As though defending myself had become some personality flaw. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Claire. He didn't ask what actually happened. He didn't ask why Lily looked ready to cry. He didn't ask why everyone else seemed perfectly comfortable embarrassing his wife. He looked directly at me. Can you just let it go? That sentence landed harder than every criticism his family had ever thrown at me. Because it told me something. He already knew who he believed. And it wasn't me. I looked at Lily. She squeezed my hand without saying a word. Children notice far more than adults realize. They don't always understand the conversation. But they always understand who feels safe. For the rest of the afternoon, I barely spoke. I smiled for photographs. I helped clean dishes. I thanked everyone for dinner. I even hugged my mother-in-law goodbye. If anyone noticed how quiet I had become. They didn't mention it. On the drive home, Ethan finally spoke. I think you could have handled today differently. I stared out the passenger window. How? You know how Mom is. There it was. The sentence that had excused years of disrespect. You know how she is. I answered quietly. And you know how I feel. He said nothing. Neither did I. When we got home, Lily carried her folded drawing upstairs, instead of hanging it on the refrigerator like she usually did. That image stayed with me all night. Not the argument. Not the insults. My daughter hiding something she had once been proud of. That was the moment I realized this wasn't only affecting me anymore. It was teaching Lily something dangerous. That the easiest way to survive a family is to make yourself smaller. I refused to let that become her lesson. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. But for the first time in years, I stopped asking myself how to fix the family. And started asking a much more important question. What would happen if I finally chose us instead? The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. For the first time in years, my mind felt strangely calm. Not because my problems had disappeared. Because I had finally stopped pretending they weren't real. I made coffee, packed Lily's lunch, and watched her happily eat pancakes while humming to herself. Children recover quickly. Adults don't. After dropping her off at kindergarten, I sat alone in my car outside the school parking lot. Instead of driving home, I opened my laptop. I updated my resume. It had been nearly 6 years since I'd looked at it. Before Lily was born, I had worked as a project manager for a marketing company. I loved the work. After becoming a mother, I switched to part-time remote projects, so our family would have more flexibility. Ironically, that flexibility slowly became dependence. I realized something uncomfortable. I had spent years making sacrifices for our family. But nobody had noticed the sacrifices. They had simply started expecting them. That afternoon, I received a message on LinkedIn. It was from an old colleague named Natalie. We hadn't spoken in almost 4 years. Claire, I heard your former company is expanding again. They're looking for someone with your experience. Interested? I stared at the message. Normally, I would have ignored it. Instead, I replied, tell me more. Over the next week, life looked exactly the same from the outside. Breakfast, school drop-offs, laundry, dinner, weekend errands. Inside, everything was changing. I completed interviews during my lunch breaks. I updated my certifications after Lily went to bed. Every evening, while Ethan watched television downstairs, I quietly rebuilt the career I'd put on hold for our family. He never noticed. Not because I was hiding. Because he had stopped paying attention long ago. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. "We'd love to offer you the Senior Operations Director position." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The salary was nearly double what I had earned before becoming a mother. The company also offered relocation assistance if I ever wanted to transfer to one of their regional offices. For the first time in years, I had options. Real options. That evening, Ethan came home complaining about work. I listened politely. When he finished, I smiled. "I got some good news today." He looked up from his phone. "What happened?" "I was offered a full-time executive position." "Oh?" "Just." "Oh?" No excitement. No congratulations. No hug. He simply shrugged. "As long as it doesn't interfere with family responsibilities." I looked at him. 7 years together. And that was his first concern. Not whether I was happy. Not whether I felt proud. Only whether dinner would still be ready on time. Something inside me quietly closed forever. The following Sunday, we attended another family dinner. This time, I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain anything. Whenever someone criticized me, I smiled politely. Whenever someone made a sarcastic comment, I simply changed the subject. The difference confused them. People who enjoy controlling your reactions become uncomfortable when they stop getting one. Melissa finally asked, "You're awfully quiet lately." I smiled. "I've just been busy." She expected more. There wasn't any. For the first time, I had stopped participating in their game. 3 days later, my new employer called again. "There may be an opportunity opening in Seattle later this year. If you're interested, we'd like you to lead the new office." Seattle. Nearly 2,000 miles away. The idea settled quietly inside my mind. Not as an escape. As a possibility. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I opened a notebook. Across the top of the page, I wrote one question. What kind of childhood do I want my daughter to remember? Not the vacations. Not the birthday parties. Not the expensive toys. The feeling. Would she remember growing up in a home where her mother constantly apologized for existing? Or one where she learned self-respect by watching it? For the next hour, I made 2 columns. Stay. Leave. Under stay, I filled almost an entire page. Stress. Arguments. Walking on eggshells. Constant criticism. Teaching Lily that silence equals peace. Under leave. There were only 3 words. Freedom. Stability. Respect. Sometimes the shorter list carries the greater weight. A month passed. Then another. My new job was thriving. For the first time in years, I felt confident again. Co-workers valued my ideas. Managers trusted my decisions. People listened when I spoke. Every evening, returning home felt like stepping into a completely different world. At work, I was respected. At home, I was expected to disappear. The contrast became impossible to ignore. One Friday evening, Ethan's mother called. "We're planning a family vacation this summer." I politely declined. "We already have other plans." Her voice sharpened. "What plans?" I smiled to myself. Plans that no longer required anyone's approval. "I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time." She wasn't used to hearing no. Neither was Ethan. That night he confronted me. Why are you pulling away from everyone? I answered honestly. I'm not pulling away. I'm simply no longer chasing people who don't respect me. He stared at me, as if hearing my voice for the first time. Neither of us realized it then. But that conversation had already changed everything. Because while everyone else believed I was becoming quieter, I was actually becoming stronger. And strength has a way of frightening people who benefited from your silence. 3 months after accepting my new position, the opportunity I'd been quietly preparing for finally became real. The Seattle office was officially opening. They wanted me to lead the launch. The promotion came with a higher salary, relocation assistance, and something I hadn't felt in years. A future that belonged to me. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I wasn't interested. Because I knew accepting it would force a conversation my marriage had avoided for years. That Friday evening, after Lily had gone to bed, I asked Ethan to sit with me on the back porch. The air was cool. The neighborhood was quiet. I've been offered the Seattle position. He nodded. Congratulations. I want to accept it. His expression changed instantly. What do you mean, you want to accept it? It means exactly what I said. You can't just move. I'm not just moving. I've spent months thinking about this. He leaned back in his chair. My job is here. I know. My family is here. I know. Lily's life is here. I looked at him calmly. Is it? Or is your family's life here? For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally he asked. So you're choosing your career over your family? I had expected that question. No. I answered quietly. I'm choosing a healthy family over an unhealthy pattern. The next week became one of the hardest of my life. We talked every evening. Sometimes calmly. Sometimes emotionally. For the first time in years, Ethan actually listened instead of defending everyone else. I told him about every moment I'd swallowed my feelings. Every holiday I dreaded. Every insult I'd smiled through. Every time Lily had watched me apologize simply to keep everyone comfortable. When I finished, he didn't argue. He simply looked exhausted. I didn't realize it had become this bad. I nodded. That's the problem. A few days later, his mother invited us to Sunday dinner. Normally I would have gone. This time I declined. Within minutes my phone rang. Claire, she said sharply, families don't skip family dinners. I answered politely. Healthy families also don't insult each other. Silence. Then she laughed. Oh, you're still upset about that? No. I replied. I'm simply done pretending it was acceptable. She tried guilt. She tried anger. She even cried. For the first time. None of it worked. That evening Ethan surprised me. I'm going to talk to them. I didn't stop him. I didn't tell him what to say. This wasn't my battle anymore. It was his. When he returned several hours later, he looked different. Older somehow. They don't think they've done anything wrong. I wasn't surprised. What did you say? I told them if they wanted a relationship with me and Lily, things had to change. And? They said I was choosing my wife over my family. I smiled sadly. No. I said. You're finally realizing your wife is your family. 2 weeks later, Ethan asked a question I never expected. What if we moved together? I stared at him. You'd leave. He nodded slowly. I've spent years asking you to adjust. He swallowed hard. Maybe it's my turn. For the first time in years. I cried. Not because everything was fixed. Because for the first time, I felt seen. 6 months later, we arrived in Seattle together. The move wasn't magical. Marriage counseling wasn't easy. Building trust again took time. There were uncomfortable conversations. Old habits resurfaced. Some days felt impossible. But something important had changed. Whenever conflict appeared, Ethan stood beside me. Not behind his family. Beside me. His parents visited several months later. Before they arrived, Ethan made something very clear. My wife will be treated with respect in our home. No raised voice. No argument. Just one calm boundary. His mother tested it once. Only once. Ethan ended the conversation immediately. She never repeated it. Sometimes people don't change because they suddenly become kinder. Sometimes they change because the consequences finally become real. Lily noticed the difference before anyone else. One evening while we were making cookies together, she smiled and said, "Daddy protects you now." Children always notice. They may not understand every conversation, but they understand safety. That simple sentence meant more to me than any apology ever could. Looking back, people often assume the promotion changed my life. It didn't. Seattle didn't change my life. The new salary didn't change my life. Even Ethan's apology didn't change my life. The real change happened months earlier. The moment I stopped measuring my worth by other people's approval. I stopped asking difficult people to become easier. I started becoming stronger instead. That decision changed everything. Because respect isn't built by winning arguments. It's built by refusing to abandon yourself. The day my husband finally stood beside me wasn't the day I found my voice. It was the day he finally heard it. And sometimes, the greatest act of revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's building a life so peaceful, so confident, and so healthy, that the people who underestimated you are forced to watch you thrive without their permission.